going on, everybody? Welcome back. I just got home from work, and this is one of my favorite times of the year, where we have a few days to maybe a week tops of the season that we call springtime, where the sun is out a little bit later and the temperatures aren't too over dramatic here, where for the most part we experience over here going from wearing jackets and sweatshirts one day to practically the next day wearing t-shirts and having heat strokes. But it's been a good week this week so far. I got my last video out to you guys, and I've been working on cleaning some things up here around the property. Area number one over by the side, where I used to have a bunch of parts all scattered all over the place that were for the Project CB. Now it's all nice and cleaned up. Things are all organized over here. And the videos, you guys have never seen this. My workbench here, or Robbie's workbench out here, is now cleared and ready for us to throw a bunch of parts back on for a while. Kyle's car is over here. It's been a minute since he's been over here working. But I have things that I need to do to Robbie's car. It's been a minute since you guys have had an update on anything that's been going on with the vehicle. Something has gone wrong with the engine. I have some work to do to it, and also simultaneously all my videos on Robbie's G23 have the most questions on those videos, and I haven't had the chance to answer any of your guys' comments and questions about what's going on with this engine and all the full details about the G23 build here. So we're just going to jump right into it, and I'll give you guys a rundown of what's going on with the G23. We'll start working on it, and then I'll give you guys an update and a full breakdown of the whole entire G23 build. Robbie's G23. It's been a minute since you guys have seen this thing. If you're new here, we're running the F23A1 bottom end with the P13H22A head. Had a lot of work done to this thing. Also, I've had a lot of problems with this thing, and I swear if I didn't have bad luck sometimes, that I would just have no luck at all. And for whatever reason, I usually don't have any issues with my builds, but Robbie's, for whatever reason, wants to be my my big problem child. So we're about to rip the head off this engine. That's right, you heard me again. I'm gonna rip the head off this engine again. Long story short, Robbie blew the head gasket on her. She doesn't hold temperature, and now we got white smoke coming out the tailpipe. So first thing I'm going to be doing is I got to get all the fluids out of this thing, because the radiator fluid, I'm going to have to get rid of it, flush out the system. Didn't get any oil in it, but now it's all contaminated with exhaust gas. So we'll flush out the system once we get the head off and before we get this thing put back together. Before I drain any of the fluids out of this thing, I'm probably going to get the car up in the air and work on getting all of the lower intake manifold nuts, just so that way once I do the fluids and I pull the thermostat housing off, I won't be having to crawl around in antifreeze on the concrete. There's the 4 nuts that I could get to before I pull the thermostat housing. Stab my finger with a screwdriver. It worked pretty good today. While I'm under here, I'll get my lower exhaust flange bolts removed from the header. And I'll get the downpipe disconnected from the exhaust piping back there. Then it's pretty dark up under here and you can't see it, but I got to reach up under his intake manifold and undo some ground wires and fish out the injector wires and a few other wires for his wire tuck. It's all running up under his intake here. Just waiting for the rest of this radiator to drain. Do some of the small things. I get my flathead and we'll get this intake taken off. Get a 12mm wrench and we will take the throttle cable off. We'll get these fuel lines disconnected. We'll get any of the vacuum lines and anything else attached here disconnected. 3 12mm bolts for the distributor. Any remaining plugs go into the head and the distributor. Pull that off. Then we'll work on the intake. Show you a few things here. I still gotta get the intake off, but because I no longer have a EGR in here, and because also the thermo valve has been deleted out of here, I've got all the room in the world to be able to reach down here with a socket wrench to get this last 12mm nut that's down here below the intake on the back side of the thermostat housing. So I've got just a couple more 12mm nuts, one underneath here that I'll get to with my socket wrench. Then I'll use my 12mm wrench to get all the remaining ones that go across. We'll get the intake off. Valve cover needs to come off. I still have the alternator belt to get off of here, just to move it out of the way. We don't need to pull the whole alternator off, just the belt. We'll loosen the bolt and the adjusters over here, get the belt out. Then the timing belt, we'll loosen the adjuster down there just to slip the timing belt off. And we'll be able to move right along to getting to the head bolts and get this head lifted off. Wouldn't be a night of turning wrenches without busting knuckles, huh? Some good news at least though. No oil up under here. KS tune plugs are doing their job. Thank God. All that's left now are to remove all the cam cap assembly, get the camshafts out of here, and we can remove the head bolts. And I can't forget the thermostat housing. It's just held on with 3 12mm bolts. Doop, doop, doop. head's now ready to come off, and I usually make a huge mess, but tonight I got a little bit smart, and I've got a bunch of my nasty engine towels laid out all over the place. That way oil and all the crap ends up dripping all over the place. It doesn't get all over the car and the concrete. So I had to pull this head off and then give you guys the nitty gritty about this G23. Looks like it did get up here in the oil. It's looking looks a little milky up in here. I'm not gonna lie to you. I wasn't sure 100% if it was Robbie's fault or not that this head gasket went bad, because we've been dealing so many times with the oil drains leaking oil that the last time that I put this motor together, I'm gonna be honest, I tried a different head gasket. I used the H23 head gasket because the H23 doesn't come with more than 6 oil drains, so I felt that maybe the H23 gasket would help us out a little bit with the oil leakage problem. First, I'm going to have to pull out my straight edge and lay it across this block just to make sure 100% that it's still straight. It was straight when we put the head on, and the head was freshly machined before we stuck that head onto the engine. So I don't know, maybe there's a good possibility that just because the head's already been machined, I believe we had to have the head machined 8 thousandths, and it had already been shaved down a little bit before, that there's possibly that the factory head bolts just are no longer within tolerance to keep the head gasket squished enough. So I've got my fingers crossed that that's going to be what the issue is. I do have a set of some ARP head studs on order, and as soon as those come in, we'll be able to throw this motor back together. When we go to put this thing back together, we've got ourselves a brand new D&J gasket set. This one is actually the proper one for this build. We're going back to using the H22A4 head gasket. That's what it actually called for on the person that actually figured this build out originally, and that seems to be the gasket that works for everybody. And that's what we're going to run again, because the A4 is an open deck block just like the F-Series engines. So now to answer all your guys' questions that you've had over the last few months about this engine here, Robbie's G23vtec. We're running the F23A1 bottom end. We're running the factory 97mm stroke F23 crankshaft. We are still running the factory F23A1 connecting rods. We are running the high compression Nippon K20A2, the RSX Type S pistons. The offset of the wrist pin on these pistons, because they're from the K series, they're flipped backwards 180 degrees. So you can see the timing marks are pointed towards my not timing side to properly get these things to rotate without any loss of potential. To actually work together with each other, we took the oil drains and matched them a little bit better to the head gasket for the H series. During the process of figuring out all the oil leaks in this area, I figured out that this area right here on the drain, on the block, that needs to be filled in, whether it's welded in or filled in however you can. This needs to be filled in, or you will end up with a slight tiny little leak just from out of a little corner right here. In the next video, I will show you guys again the gasket laid on top of it, so you'll see what I'm talking about. Water tube here we have the F23 water tube going from the back side of the water pump, and up to this point is where I decided to cut and junction the H22 thermostat housing water tube portion, and I welded it together right here. So you guys will need to figure out if you're going to want to cut the tube and run your own rubber hose with some clamps, or if you'll want to cut the two pieces and weld them together. The head, you're going to want to run an H22 head. Robbie's here. Both the exhaust and the intake side have been ported and polished. For the two oil drains closest to the timing side that need to be blocked, we are running the KS tuned oil plugs. We're going to be running the H22A4, which is the 1997 to 2001 Honda Prelude. Gasket set. The timing's where it gets a little bit tricky on this particular hybrid. I do not know if there actually is a true water pump that is just out of the box, straight bolt-on, that has the proper gear for this belt setup. But initially, I had to take the F23 water pump and pull the timing gear off of that water pump, and I had to press on an H22 water pump timing gear in order for that to work with this setup. So here we've got the F23 water pump with the H22 water pump timing gear pressed on. Down below for your timing components, for the lower, you're going to need to get an H22 lower timing gear, OBD1 or OBD2. It doesn't matter unless you're running an OBD2 setup and an OBD2 car, then you'll definitely need the OBD2 one. But if you're running an OBD1 vehicle, doesn't matter, either one will work. And then the rest of it's just all H22 timing, H22 timing belt, timing gears, and your makeshift hybrid H22 F series water pump. And then the last thing about this build that you guys have been asking about is the actual balance shaft delete that I did on this thing. I didn't run the actual like 1320 or a KS tuned balance shaft delete on this thing. I did my own balance shaft delete on it. If I can find the pictures of everything I used to get it done, I'll drop the pictures here right now. Everything that you would actually use out of the balance shaft delete kits, the plugs that go down into the crankshaft girdle. I just tapped out all the holes that needed to be plugged up and ran to the hardware store and grabbed myself every proper size Allen plugs to thread into all the holes so that I could take care of those. Then as far as the rest of the oil pump, I found the two proper size freeze plugs to press into the main holes where the balance shafts poke through, and then I just tapped and plugged up every other remaining oil feed hole and oil drain galley that there's no leaks. Sealed everything else up on top of it with some Honda Bond. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Just did my own do-it-yourself balance shaft delete on this thing. Cost me less than $10. There you go. Alright guys, I believe I answered all your questions. It's time for me to get cleaned up around here. I got nothing left for the rest of the night. I gotta get up and go to work tomorrow. Next time you'll see me will be on my payday, when I'll be heading off to John Jordan's to pick up the camshafts for the race car, upload that tune, and let you guys in on the big news that we have coming up for this channel. Thank you guys for sticking through the last few months. Thank you guys for watching all these videos. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing these videos. Keep this channel growing. Until next time, Peace out.